Hello, everybody. I'm Zenith, and welcome back to the Disney Debate, where Kat Mac and I talk about Disney products and Disney in general. How's it going today, Kat?
I be doing pretty good, me matey. Nah, I'm just kidding. There's no pirates in this. Well, not technically, anyway.
But it is Talk Like a Pirate Day.
Yes,
Yarr.
it is. Rawr.
Yarr.
Yes, good old Treasure Island and good old John Silver. Thank you for Talk Like a Pirate Day. You are awesome.
Today we actually have a science fiction themed movie to talk about. You may have heard of it, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And let me just say this. This is the best live-action film that Disney has produced up until this point in time.
Oh, so damn true. Like, this is like Pirates of the Caribbean old school style. That is how good it is.
Yeah, it's really good, and the characterization is deep. Just the story is a lot of fun, and the acting is simply superb. It's leagues above anything we've shown on the show so far. And dear God, I'm amazed. I mean, I think the push away from RKO worked well for this film, incredibly well.
I know. You see effort. Honest to God, effort.
We may not see many female characters. There's probably like one minor in the entire film. It's mostly Sausage Fest, but the actors do an amazing job, and it's just awesome. But what are your initial thoughts on this film?
Well, obviously I've heard the story before. It's a classic by Jules Verne. Obviously, how could you not hear of it? The only thing was, I never actually watched the film. I saw clips of that legendary scene with the squid, but other than that, I never really had a desire to watch it. Now that I've seen it, I want to go back in time and kick myself for not watching it sooner. Because this really is a great action flick. For those of you who don't know the story, it's about these three. Well, hold on, let me start over. For those of you who don't know the story, it takes place in about the mid-1800s, where a bunch of ships have been mysteriously destroyed by what they call a sea monster, and they call on the help of a professor and his assistant to go investigate the matter. And while he's out at sea, his ship does get attacked by the ship, and him, his assistant, and the ship's harpooner fall overboard and end up washing up on the so-called sea monster itself, which is actually a submarine run by Captain Nemo, who's kind of crazy and a recluse who's pretty much separated himself from all society, but nevertheless welcomes them aboard his ship. And pretty much the entire movie is just them in the submarine, sailing throughout the ocean and pretty much, beholding the wonders of, the vast underwater world. And it's pretty cool.
And, with that setup, it may seem a little bit boring, but really it is interesting. All I knew about the film from when I was a kid was the giant squid. Everyone's heard about the giant squid. And I thought it was just about that, just about that and the monster. But honestly, I'm really glad that they took the time to develop these characters, and the scenes in the submarine where they're really just talking and conversing are some of the best in the film. It's not just the action that's good. And so let's start talking about these characters. First, we have Kirk Douglas as Ned Land, and by God, he's awesome.
Oh, Kirk Douglas, you are the epitome of awesome.
He is the semi-main character. Him and the scientist are the main characters, but really it focuses a lot on him. He's a harpooner by trade, and he really doesn't believe in sea monsters. And so, when the ship gets attacked, he just gets ready to fight off what he thinks is the monster. But it turns out to be the ship. And he's just like, okay, well, let us go home. I'm just a harpooner. I'm just here to make a big catch. But they're forced to stay on the ship. And so he's the kind of guy who's, he'll take what he can get. He doesn't like being on the ship, but when he finds out that there's gold at the bottom of the ocean, he wants to take it and he wants to make use of the treasures. He's kind of an audience stand-in when you think about it, because we wouldn't believe in giant sea monsters. We would want to take the gold at the bottom of the ocean. We wouldn't really care about the research and the scientific properties about everything. We'd be like, hey, there's gold. Let's grab it. Let's make a profit.
Yay, profit.
But also, he's just really an enjoyable character. He's the one actually who plays guitar. Is it a guitar?
Yeah, it's like a banjo almost, but yeah, like a little mini guitar.
Mm-hmm. And he provides the music for the ship, and he hangs with this seal that's on board the ship, and every scene he's in is fun. Mm-hmm. He's a fun character.
Yeah, he's like really happy-go-lucky. He's the guy who can almost associate with everyone on a positive level. Although he can be obnoxious when he wants to be. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, he tries to keep things lively and, tries to put, a sort of sense of reality on everything.
Mm-hmm.
But, and, hey, Kirk Douglas, he can actually sing. Who'd have thought it?
Yeah, he's a great singer. I have to say he's probably the best actor, or the most natural actor in the film. In terms of, it doesn't sound like he's reading from a script. He's just going around and having fun with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, I must be honest, though, the first time I watched it, his character kind of annoyed me a lot. Because, I mean, you're on a... well, let's put it this way. This is like the mid-1800s. Submarines haven't actually been invented yet. And you're probably one of the first people ever to actually go on this craft of wonder to actually see what lies at the very bottom of the sea, something I'm sure nobody at that time had seen yet, and basically be able to go out into that world and just experience, what the ocean really has to offer. But yet the entire time he's down there, he does nothing but complain and pretty much schemes ways on how to escape. And this is kind of understandable considering he was forced to go on this sub against his will. But, if you're going to stay, at least, try to enjoy the ride. He really doesn't have an appreciation for any of the sea life or,
But then again, I don't expect him to, since he's a harpooner. He kills these sea creatures for his trade.
I guess, but you figure someone who spends a lot of time on the seas would have some form of appreciation, for the ocean, but he doesn't really seem to have that.
I think he provides one side of the spectrum. He's the people who, okay, I just want to get off this boat and I just want to go back to my trade and be an ordinary, fisherman. Mm-hmm. But, there are other ends of the spectrum that he could have been,
True. And despite the fact that, he obviously has grudges against Captain Nemo and the crew for keeping him on board and pretty much restricting his activity every time, he acts up or does something that against their orders, he's still a good guy at heart. He actually, helps them fight during those giant squid scene and even saves Captain Nemo's life, much to his chagrin.
He charges right in, and afterwards he's like, why did I do that? But, it's just, he's a very honorable person.
Mm-hmm. But then again, there is some contradictions. It's not major contradictions. It happens more towards the end when he comes up with the idea that, hey, the only way that we're going to get off this ship is if somebody knows where we're going. He manages to find out the location of where the ship is heading, writes down the coordinates, and puts them in bottles. And while this is logical at first, and you're kind of rooting for him, thinking, okay, we hope somebody finds those bottles, that way those men can finally be free. Towards the end, when you see that Captain Nemo is starting to have a change of heart, and you think that A, he's going to let them go, and B, he's going to share his wonderful technology with the rest of the world, then the Navy shows up, and everything goes to shit, and it's all because of Ned. So, in a way, he is a hero, but is also an antagonist at the same time. I really don't want to say anti-hero or anti-antagonist or anything, but I don't know, like, his actions have both a good and a negative consequence, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is it's not cut and dry, and it's not, set in stone that his actions could have helped, and they could have, harmed the crew. So in the end, it's, he was just trying to do what he thought was right.
And then there are times where he just seems like a thief, because, he wants to, like, take all the gold that they found because Captain Nemo considers it worthless since he doesn't go on land at all.
Hmm.
But, but even then, like, it's still his stuff. He found it. But Ned is constantly trying to steal it. He steals some of his specimens that he kept in jars, probably, rare or endangered or even in extinct creatures, which he just casually, uncorks, throws the fish to the seal, and then drinks the alcohol content that are in it. And, and at one point, like, he completely ignores Nemo's warning when he does go on land, to stay away from the jungles where the cannibals live. But he does it anyway, just, because he's like, oh, that guy's just trying to scare me. He's not... I'm going to do the exact opposite of what he says and then, run back to him crying later. So... He, like I said, he kind of fluctuates all over the place. He's almost like the Jack Sparrow of the movie.
Speaking of Jack Sparrow, that scene where he's running away from the cannibals is pretty much shot for shot what Pirates of the Caribbean, the third movie, or was it the second?
Movie.
The second movie where Jack's running from the cannibals. Mm-hmm. So you can see where that was inspired from.
Mm-hmm. Actually, a lot of the second Pirates movie does come from this movie. Jack running away from the cannibals, Captain Nemo playing at the organ. There is a lot of images that invoke it. Even the ship, the Nautilus, to a degree, kind of looks like the Davy Jones ship, like when it's coming out of the water.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Captain Nemo, what did you think of him?
I loved him. Captain Nemo was awesome.
Like, he's such a deep character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's possibly one of the most, like, complex characters ever, like, written in a screenplay or in a book. Because the story behind Captain Nemo is that, he's captain of the Nautilus, the first submarine ever built. He originally started off as a captive, forced to build war machines and weapons and everything. And because, he's so smart and so inventive, they demanded that he hand over his technology, which he refused, and this ended up costing him his wife and son. So he managed to escape with a good portion of his fellow prisoners who helped build the Nautilus, and they've pretty much been roaming the seas ever since. But because of his ordeal, he now views every and all type of warship as an enemy. Even if they're just there to keep peace. He views everybody as an enemy, so he makes it his mission to basically blow up every single ship that is, carrying ammunition or goods for soldiers, or basically anything, that's war related. Mm-hmm. And this kind of makes him complex, because you're thinking, well, in a way he is doing a service, because he's preventing, enemies who are maybe invading foreign lands and, killing people, preventing them from getting goods and more bullets and stuff. But at the same time, you're thinking, these are also men who are just doing their job, who probably don't associate themselves with the war one way or another, and they're, just dying needlessly. So.
It's kind of, I mean, you can definitely see where he's coming from. I mean, he's bitter over the fact that he was a slave, and his wife and his child were tortured and killed, and that's really hanging over him, and he wants to prevent this from happening to other people, and yet at the same time, his actions are probably causing other people to suffer that are innocent.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, he believes he's doing the right thing, and he doesn't believe that humanity is ready for his technology or ready for peace, and that's why he hangs out under the ocean, because that's where everything seems peaceful to him. So you can definitely see where he's coming from, but at the same time, I can't get behind his actions. He's very much set in his ways, and he won't change. And even when he does somewhat have a change of heart, because of Ned, he's brought right back the other way.
Yeah, 'cause, yeah, he's like a really complex character, because there are a lot of times throughout the movie where he talks with the professor, who wants to get on his good side, in hopes to sort of, get him to let them go, and also to help, share his technology and scientific findings. And there's a lot of philosophical discussion, and there's a lot of debate between them, what is right and what is wrong, and how Nemo sees the world, and his perception of, good and evil. And it really is fascinating, how he sees things. And the professor, he sort of tries to combat him, saying, oh, well, this is good, well, this is bad. But then eventually throughout the film, he actually sways the professor to his side. So, and it kind of makes the audience kind of sway to his side too. I mean, I found myself agreeing with him sometimes. I mean, if you had the power and technology to, stop a war from happening, would you use it? And at the cost of innocent lives?
It's a catch-22, and so that's what really makes him such a a likable character, and such a very deep character. And I really enjoyed watching him, and the actor does a great job portraying him. So.
Oh yeah, James Mason is amazing. I'm surprised the guy hasn't won more awards than he has. It's I'm looking up his repertoire, and oh my god, he was in a lot of stuff. Nothing that I particularly recognize, but it's a long list.
And the other main character of the film is the professor, Professor Pierre M. Aronnax. I can't really say that because it's like a French word, I think.
Yeah, it's a French name.
Aronnax. I'm probably saying that wrong. But it's played by Paul Lucas, and he does a great job. I think the only thing that really hampers his performance is the accent itself, because sometimes it's hard to completely understand what he's saying. But then again, that's understandable because that's the character he's playing.
Yeah, the professor, he kind of is an innocent caught up in all this by accident, because the whole reason he is on the ship in the first place is because he was a professor who was on his way to Beijing, basically on a scientific excursion, but unfortunately the ship he was supposed to take got blown up by the Nautilus. So he's pretty much stranded, but while he's there, reporters start heckling him, asking for his opinion of, what's been going on with this, supposed sea creature. And while he keeps denying that he doesn't know anything and he has no desire to find out about it, they twist his words so that, he says that he plans on going an excursion to find it. And even though, this ends up, twisting a lot of his words, this gains the attention of a naval officer who actually is planning on going on an excursion to find the monster. So he kind of gets dragged along, mostly to be the brain of the operation. And he does see it kind of pointless until he actually does, fall overboard and ends up on the Nautilus. So really the whole thing with him being there is a huge accident. But nevertheless, you see that he takes full advantage of being in the Nautilus and actually, going underwater and exploring the sea life and everything. You see that he loves it and is, amazed by it. And he also keeps a journal throughout the whole thing. So he's kind of our sort of borderline narrator, if you will.
Whereas Ned is our everyman. He's the intellectual everyman. He's fascinated by everything he sees, and he's the one, showing us, okay, this is what's so great about the ocean and what's so great about everything around. And the thing I liked about the professor is that, he is always the man of reason. He's a very democratic person, and he's always reasoning with Nemo. He's the one who pretty much saves the lives of the other two people who are with him, Ned and his assistant, which he doesn't really do much in the film. So he pleads with Nemo for their lives, and at the end he goes and he sacrifices himself in order to save them. And so all three of them get trapped on the ship because of that, because his loyalty to his crew was being tested by Nemo. Professor is a very loyal person. He's a very kind person, and I think that really comes through in his talks with Nemo, because he knows that Nemo's been through so much, and he can understand that, and at the same time, he's trying to turn him. He's trying to show him that, okay, well, yes, I know you've been through so much, and I know it's hurt you, but there's still good in this world. And it constantly comes through in his actions.
Yeah, he's also very easily swayed, because you see while he's trying to convince Nemo, that to sort of change his view of the world, while subsequently convincing him to let them go. At the same time, he becomes, so fascinated with Nemo's philosophies and so entranced by the technology around him that Nemo kind of ends up converting him to his side. And they start to share, views on the world as well, and it gets to the point where even his assistant notices that he has changed considerably since the journey started, even calling him captain at one point. And it's not because, he associates him on the same intellectual level and philosophies. It's more that he sees him becoming a bit, sort of crazy and, trying to justify, heinous acts, for the sake of the greater good. So, like I say, he kind of gets a little more useless as the film goes on. He doesn't leave that much of a big impact aside from, just putting a scientific spin on things. But at the same time, he still is needed to sort of convey Nemo's thoughts to the audience, since Nemo, is sort of withdrawn and doesn't really confide in anyone aside from the professor, who he respects.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he even brings into question, his whole moral being, especially after Ned saves his life. Because, you could see that Nemo is clearly conflicted. How can a person that hates him so much actually, is willing to sacrifice his life in order to save him? That would mean there's actually good in the world, something that Nemo long ago has decided doesn't exist. So that's a pretty pivotal scene in my opinion, because, you kind of see the whole character of Captain Nemo change, and the professor almost succeeds in getting him to share, finally let down his defenses and share his findings with the world. But like we said, everything goes to shit.
So, I mean, these are some really complex characters here, and I think they're really well portrayed. There's also the assistant, like I said, but he doesn't really do too much. He always acts as the assistant when he's not assisting the professor. He's assisting Ned. He kind of goes with everyone. So, I mean, he's not really a major character.
We should note, though, that he is played by a rather famous actor, though. Peter Lorre. For those of you who don't know, he's actually a very famous horror icon.
Yeah, I recognize the voice. You'd probably recognize him in in A Pup Named Scooby-Doo. He played the guy who looked like Frankenstein, and he's kind of like the Igor type person.
Yeah, he has the accent 'cause he's from Austria and everything, but his most famous roles is he played a serial killer in this film called M, and he also played the character Mr. Moto, which was a detective series. And his face is kind of iconic too, because it's been converted to a lot of cartoon characters. The only thing I think of at the top of my head, Boo Berry.
Mm-hmm.
That accent, the sunken-in eyes and everything, that's pretty much his look. It is kind of a shame that he was underutilized in this film, but then again, he is there just to be the assistant, to sort of be the character just told what to do and see it from sort of an innocent point of view. But, yeah, other than that, he doesn't really have any good moments. And it really is a shame, because they could have just used any other actor for that role. It's just a shame that, like, Peter Lorre doesn't get to, be scary or, intimidating or anything like he usually is.
It's unfortunate, but you can definitely recognize the voice, and I think that really is what he has going for him. So, I mean, it's not a memorable character, it's a memorable voice, and it's still enjoyable. So those are the characters. We don't have a large cast. There's still the crew of the Nautilus, but they're just there.
The crew of the Nautilus, I kept thinking the whole time was sort of like a cult, and the ending kind of justified that. They're like the cult of Nemo. Because, like, they don't talk a lot of the time. They pretty much are there just to follow orders and repeat orders. And, of course, at the end, when Nemo is wounded and is dying, he decides that the Nautilus is going to sink with him, and his crew decide that they are going to die along with the Nautilus.
Mm-hmm. Like, and it's pretty cultish type thinking.
Yeah, I mean, like, I understand they're grateful to the guy for busting him out of prison and everything, but you think these guys would sort of have their own aspirations or something? Instead, they just stay on the Nautilus and that's it. And then they're like, well, that's all we have to do with our lives. And don't forget the best character of the film. Esmeralda.
Esmeralda the seal.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Nemo has a pet seal named Esmeralda, or Ezzy, as Ned likes to call her, and she is so adorable. Like, I want her. I want a pet seal.
They must be hard to train, though, I imagine.
Yes and no. I mean, I've been to plenty of water parks where they put on seal shows and everything, and it's all that matters if you're constant, with feeding them and rewarding them and everything. But I thought the seal did a great job, especially with character acting and everything. And Kirk Douglas actually seems to have a lot of fun every time she's on screen. I think he really enjoyed working with the seal, and I would too personally.
So, yeah, I mean, the cast all do a great job. The characters are deep and memorable for the most part. Mm-hmm. And the story is very interesting. I mean, it's a very big adventure story, and it goes from, cannibal islands to giant squids in the waters and to an remote island called Volcania. And it's a very big adventure tale, and I thoroughly enjoy that. Mm-hmm. The effects are really well done. In fact, this won Best Special Effects at the Academy Awards for 1954. And it really shows, because the effects for the giant squid are so realistic. Mm-hmm. Like, they're really great practical effects, and they don't look fake.
I know, that's really awesome. I mean, it kind of helps the fact that they had the battle take place at night and during a rainstorm, so you couldn't see the strings or anything. But it actually does look like the squid is moving on its own, and you see it, like, grabbing people and thrashing about, and you even see, like, its mouth and its eye at one point, and it's really, really creepy, and, like, it is genuinely terrifying, and that's what makes it so cool.
So, yeah, I have to say they outdid themselves in terms of effects. The sets look really good. The Nautilus looks like a real ship. I'm pretty sure that, it was all built on a set and not an actual submarine. And so, everything just looks really well done. In terms of music, the background music is good, but there is one really memorable song, and this is probably the best music number in the history of the live-action Disney films, and it's called A Whale of a Tale. It's sang by Kirk Douglas, and it lasts for about, 2 to 3 minutes or more. Mm-hmm. It's a very long musical number, and it's thoroughly enjoyable.
Yeah, and it starts off right at the beginning, too. I think he reprises it a little later, but like, you get to see just, it kind of, like, shows how much fun a character Ned is, and, it's a really jaunty sea tune. I was jamming along with it as he was, like, playing it to the crew.
It's a really enjoyable tune, it goes, I'll tell you a whale of a tale, and I gotta, I may not believe in these sea monsters, but I'll, catch all these big fish, and it's a really manly type song.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a shame that they only had one in there, but then again, this is an action sci-fi movie, so I guess they wanted to keep those songs to a minimum. But it is nice that they threw that one little thing in there, and it was memorable at that.
hmm And it does reprise a couple different times, so it's something that is worthwhile.
Mhm. And one thing we should note is that this movie actually spawned a ride at Disney World that unfortunately isn't there anymore, but it's still pretty cool. If anybody had been to Disney back in the day, they actually do have a ride where you actually go into the Nautilus and go underwater, and then you even get attacked by the giant squid.
Mhm.
And it really sucks that they don't have that anymore, at least not in Disney World, because I would have loved to go on that thing.
And one thing about this film is the fact that this is one of the big feature-length live-action films. With the push to Buena Vista, they were able to do much more, and this is a much longer film than the other live-action films we've seen up until this point. And yet, it doesn't feel that way. It doesn't feel like a long film at all.
Mm-mm. I mean, to be fair, there are some parts that kind of drag, where they're just like the parts where they're like sitting in a room talking. I mean, the dialogue is fascinating, but it does, because I mean, half the time you kind of expect there to be a lot more action, and this does kind of slow the pacing a bit. But for the most part, it does keep like give you what you want, and it does keep you staying for more.
And I think it's a great adaptation of the book. I mean, when you're going to put a book to film form in terms of live action, you want to give it enough time to get some of these scenes out. And the dialogue, I don't know if the dialogue is word for word, but I mean, the dialogue is fascinating. You have these scenes where they're sitting down at the table and they've just been abducted by Nemo, and, it's like they're eating their last meal. And so there's some really great scenes here, and I have to say that in terms of book adaptations, it was really well handled, because considering, some of Jules Verne's books, portions can drag immensely.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
Jules
I
Verne
think,
likes to talk a lot.
yeah, he does. I mean, I read Journey to the Center of the Earth, and that goes on for a long time before it even gets going.
Mhm.
And I think in terms of what they did with this was, yes, it does drag in some parts, but that's probably mostly due to the book. They did a good job of actually making these scenes exciting and memorable, and these characters are deep and complex and well acted.
Mhm. It's actually surprising. You think that of all the movies that are being remade nowadays, especially with Disney and all that, why hasn't this film been remade? 'Cause,
I
like,
don't know. I don't think there's that much push towards this type of sci-fi, because we're all in space science fiction these days.
yeah, true. I mean, because the effects for this movie, which was made in the mid-50s, is really good. So you wonder how would this film look now with updated special effects and everything. Unfortunately, I have seen, like recent adaptations of Captain Nemo, thank you, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. But,
Oh God.
but I think if, like, Disney wanted to, like, to remake this, actually, like, update it, get some really good actors, get an actual submarine, and then, a huge ass giant squid for them to fight. I think it could possibly be an epic film, possibly of, Pirates of the Caribbean standards. But then again, they could completely botch it, so I guess maybe it is for the best that they don't remake it.
I think I'd give it another 10 years, and then they could possibly do it again. Right now, again, everything is going to space. We have John Carter of Mars, and we have Star Trek, and we have all these other big space films. Let space die down a bit, and we'll go back to the sea.
Okay. Overall, I thought this is a great film. Like you said, definitely the best one we've seen so far. Like, Disney really went all out in this, with the effects, with the acting, the dialogue, everything. And I really think it's going to be tough for them to top this. I mean, I'm sure they will at some point, but right now this is like the crowning moment of the 50s.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of films coming up, I mean, I know Bedknobs and Broomsticks is pretty good, and Mary Poppins is coming up soon. But in terms of like live action adventure or science fiction films, I don't know too much about what's going to happen. I know we have Tron coming up later down the line, but this is this is almost the cream of the crop here.
Mhm. Yeah. So.
So I mean, while RKO did some good work, honestly, the push towards Buena Vista really helped out.
That is definitely for sure. Maybe not in terms of their animation later on, but in terms of their live action, I think they did a wise move, opening up their own studio.
Overall, in terms of acting, in terms of characters, in terms of special effects, mostly music, there are some okay parts, but in terms of all these factors, it's a great film, and it's a great adaptation of the original story. So I'm really happy with this film. The live-action films that we viewed in the past were not up to this caliber. While they were somewhat good, even the ones we liked weren't really epic like this is.
So that was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And next time we have another adventure flick. And this one is actually a bit of a historical one, too. We have Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier.
And this is one that you probably have heard of, because as a kid, I watched this constantly. Like, this is one of the big kid films, like King of the Wild Frontier. Everyone knows about Davy Crockett. I haven't seen this in a long time, so I don't know if it holds up. I don't know if it's going to be as good as 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but it's going to be enjoyable, and it's going to be cheesy.
Believe it or not, I actually have watched this recently, and the reason being is because, little announcement, I'm making my own show! Yay! And this, I'm actually intending to be the second episode. For the first episode, tune into the next podcast where I will announce it, because by then I will have actually finished it. Hooray!
Yay!
Yeah. Keep in mind, though, I did shoot this a while ago, so excuse me for it not being the best and for me probably being 20 pounds lighter, but yes, I have watched Davy Crockett. I have written my review. We're obviously going to do the podcast first, but just letting you know I do have an actual video review of it that will be coming out soon.
So next time it's Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier, and then Lady and the Tramp, and then, finally back to animation.
Yay!
Yay.
And then back to True Life Adventures.
Well, we'll see. Honestly, I'm kind of pushing towards at least, making True Life Adventures into a special, because it kind of threw a wrench into the works.
Yeah, pain in the asses.
But we'll see. We'll see what happens. We're definitely going to review it eventually, but it'll be a little bit later down the line, probably, most likely.
But in the meantime...
thank you guys for watching the Disney Debate. I'm Zenith Rule, and this is my good friend Kat Mac. If you have any comments, criticisms, suggestions, or Disney movie suggestions that don't fall under main Disney canon, but you want to suggest for us to review, please let us know at zenithrule.blip.tv, or you can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/zenithrule and twitter.com/fmtrabbit. Or you can follow us on Facebook. We have a couple Facebook pages, facebook.com/zenithrule, facebook.com/catmac, and our fan pages, Team Die Zenith. Come and join the team and learn about all the projects coming up. Or you can join the Disney Debate fan page on Facebook. But until then, I'm Zenith Rule.
And I am Kat Mac /FMTRabbit/CatTCritic.
And we'll see you guys next time.
TTFN.
Thank you for watching the Media Meltdown. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more awesome videos. And if you like what you see, show your support on the Patreon page at patreon.com/Media Meltdown. See you all next time on the The Media Meltdown.